Sorry, I'm late. Making a note. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started on our November 27th P and Z Commission agenda meeting. I have a note to mention first. A Buick has their lights on. License XH1N7N, if that will help anyone. Okay. First thing I want to mention is, I don't know if there's any confusion, because I think I've heard some people talking about it. The property referred to as the Finley Crossing that is on 11th and 9th over here in town, kind of directly north of Walgreens off 17th, is not, there's nothing about it on the agenda tonight, if anyone's here for that. Just want to make sure everybody understands that's not part of what we're talking about tonight. Moving right along, first thing, of course, is to approve the minutes of our last meeting from October 23rd. You've had time to review. If you find any mistakes, errors, or omissions, we would mention those. If not, I would accept a motion for approval of those.
I make a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes.
Thank you, William, and Natalie second. Go ahead and roll call. Megan, please.
Bradley Goldberg.
Aye.
Trevor Branch.
Aye.
Alexi Pavlov.
Aye.
Adam Brown.
Aye.
Pete Renfro.
Aye.
Stacy Colbert. Aye. Chad Zickafoose.
Aye.
Lynn Oaks.
Aye.
Jeff Garrison.
Aye. Okay, number 2, scheduled visitors and guests. We have none. Unfinished business, we have none, so we'll move directly into the new business. Looking at an application of a preliminary plat 23-0003, referred to as the Green Bridge Estates. Property owner is Leslie and Thomas Carter. Property location southeast of the Green Bridge Road and North 10th Avenue intersection. Cameron, the floor is open to you, sir.
Yes, the application is for the preliminary plat for Green Bridge Estates subdivision. The preliminary plat that was submitted does conform to the existing zoning of R1B Single Family Zoning District. The OTO link trail plan identifies a future trail along the western edge of this property. Staff will further work with the developer to confirm the best location of this public trail easement and shall require that trail easement to be dedicated to the final plat stage. Once the proposed water and sewers plans have been completed and designed, staff and our third-party engineers will review for compliance and coordinate with the Department of Natural Resources for any necessary compliance. Any offsite easements and public utility extensions would be the responsibility of the developer. There are environmental features identified on the property. During construction plan review, the developer will be required to submit to the city and the appropriate agencies for compliance. The required traffic impact study, and stormwater report was submitted, reviewed, and approved by staff, the city's engineers, the Ozark Special Road District's engineers. The traffic volumes existing and proposed did not warrant any road improvements. The traffic impact study did determine maintenance would need to be performed to improve site visibility and site distances at intersections. I do want to point out typically what you might see in subdivisions, and I'll pull the plat up here. Generally, there are two forms of access to public access out of a subdivision. In this case, when staff was reviewing this with the applicant, the road districts, the Ozark Fire District, and per the traffic study counts, it was determined that a two public accesses were not required. They are proposing a public access to the west to 10th that would tie into Green Bridge. And then there's a private emergency access easement that would get out for fire services to the north to Green Bridge. However, that will not be, per staff's findings and report, that was not required to be a public road access. Given all this, based on staff report and findings, staff did recommend approval of this preliminary plat.
Okay,
Happy to answer any
thank you, Cameron.
Yep.
Do they have any representation of the owner or applicant here this evening that would wish to speak beyond what Cameron has said? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners.
If you could state your name and address, please.
My name is Jeff Farrell, 3256 Allendale Street, Southwest Roanoke, Virginia. Thank you for the time. I'd like to start off by thanking Cameron and his staff, the staff at Public Works, Special Road District. We've been working on this through several meetings with our engineers for about 6 months, trying to make sure that we get the best possible application in front of this body for your consideration. What you're looking at is 88 units, 88 lots as a maximum buildable envelope. There's an area on the northwest corner that's reserved. You can see that on the screen is northwest corner is reserved for stormwater retention. On the eastern side, you can see the white area where there's a natural drainage easement reserved for stormwater management. And then there's an 88 units that are remaining. There's some debate about whether we'll be able to use all 88 lots. There's some wet areas in one of the corners on lots 87 and 88, which may be transitioning those from buildable lots to open space. And then there are 2 lots at the emergency access, which will need to be worked out whether or not they're going to be buildable at a final plat or through construction documents. Make sure we're providing the access and the appropriate amount of space to do that. So we've worked through a number of conditions and requirements to get to this point. We're comfortable with staff recommendations in the staff report regarding our future requirements for improvements. It includes things like stormwater management and road improvements and site distance improvements. We're comfortable with all of those. And happy to answer any questions that any of you may have at this point or later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. We'll call you back with any questions. Thank you. So this is the point where we'll open it up for public comment or questions. We have a 5-minute limit, please, if you would. So I'm assuming with the number of people we have, we'll have a number of folks that would like to speak. So if you would please, Megan will be timing us I'll hold up, she'll motion me and I'll let you know maybe when you have 1 minute left or something like that. But we do want everyone to speak that wants to. We don't want to hold anyone back, okay? So we will open up the public portion of this meeting and you are welcome to come forward. And when you come, if you would, please state your name and address for us, please.
John Seawright, 2108 North 9th Avenue. I see here that you guys have the full packet loaded up. Is that correct? Is that
Pardon?
correct? The full packet that you sent out? Okay. Oh, well, we'll just go through, I'll just go through each, so you guys can follow along. So if you want to go to page 12, we'll just, that way you can bring it up so everybody can take a look at it. We'll start with page 12. So on page 12, under the water line for this 8-inch water line in the intersection of 10th and Ridge Court, there's a suggestion for a secondary supply installed with this. I assume for a loop system, and that you also go through and they talk about using some of the existing lines that are down. I want to say probably 9th Avenue. To make the loop, which then would also go through the existing residents there in the Stone Ridge subdivision, which would, I assume you're going to want to try to get an easement through existing property. So I'm not quite sure what the idea there. The biggest one that we have a concern with is that this 8-inch water line, Stone Ridge was considered the end of the line for the water for this part of town. It's not in a stepping stone for another addition on past that. So my thought is this 8-inch, what capacity are we at 8-inch in Stone Ridge when you add another 90 houses, so a total of 150 for this part here. Page 13 also talks about the sewer line, so the 8-inch sewer line. I would like to challenge you also as well in that for adding 90 more houses or 88 more houses to an 8-inch sewer line. What is the capacity that we're at there? It also talks about that all this goes to a lift station that I believe is down and around the corner. So I think that we need to really take a look at that. So that's 2 of the utilities that go there. The next one is still on page 13. This will be the streets. So 10th Street is classified as a residential collector. This classification for the Stone Ridge, which is approximately 60 homes, not 150 homes. So the proposed entrance at the 10th and Ridge Court, is considered deemed will sufficiently handle the proposed development traffic. As in my career, I believe this is actually false, and we'll get into the traffic study here in just a second. Because we talk about this emergency entrance. Now, the emergency entrance, as you can see on the plat, there is just an easement. There's no road there. So what are we considering as an emergency? That a tornado has come through? I'm not sure exactly. I think you guys really might want to take a look at that. If it's just an easement, then that means there's fences there. Nothing is actually applicable for a first responder to actually go up this road that you call an emergency entrance to this part. So I think we'd really want to take a look at that. Let's go on down to, let's see, stormwater. Stormwater, I didn't have too many problems except for it looks like you have the outflow on the west detention pond dumping directly onto 10th Street or 10th Avenue. You might want to take a look at that. That shows up on page 108. The additional utilities for this for 97 homes, I believe we saw on page, let's say on page 97, showed the depiction of a 2,000 or 2,200 square foot house. That is approximately what we're thinking for this area, which is about 30,000 watts or 30 kilowatt hours at 89 or 88 houses that that is quite a few, I would say probably around 30 kilowatt per hour for demand there, which means you're gonna have to have quite a bit of infrastructure for, well, I have 1 minute, okay. Well, I'll get into the traffic study real quick. The traffic study, in my opinion, is, well, it's flawed. It was done on August 10th, which school wasn't in session. The other part was there was stated no fixed route, which doesn't take into consider the bus routes that happen there. There's 6 of them a day. So when you have this traffic study that doesn't take into consideration the actual items that are happening there, it's a flawed sample. And anything that's generated from this flawed sample then also is flawed. The traffic study never addresses that at 450 vehicles per day or 550 vehicles per day. When you add 150 houses, or not, when you add 90 houses, makes it 150 houses. That makes it like 1,400 vehicles per day.
You wrap it up, sir, please.
Okay. I have these all documented. If you'd like a copy of this, where you guys can review it in time, if you'd like that. Would you all like a copy?
Not at this time. I may ask you later.
Okay.
Yes, thank
Thanks.
you. Up next is the gentleman here with the,
Well, I was just gonna say, do we have somebody from the city address any of the concerns with utility?
let's have some people answering some questions. I thought I'd get a few people before we ask someone up to answer. Maybe it's duplicate questions. So would someone else like to speak at this point? Lady in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Bridget Cox. I live at 710 East Rock Creek in Stone Ridge. I just wanted to follow John because I was kind of saying a lot of the same things that he had pointed out. As far as the water runoff, the maps show, I understand that there's been an assessment done. However, the maps show the flow rate goes directly across 10th. So you've got increased traffic. You've got increased flow rate from the storms. You're clearing out all of the, green that stops any groundwater flow. So you're increasing your groundwater flow right into the flood zone. As we all know, the river floods up constantly in the spring, sometimes in the fall. So you're going to add to our flooding. But what people aren't seeing is that behind, if you could pull up the map there again. Yes, behind you've got Rock Creek. And I know the flow rates go from that plot of land that they're discussing into the one behind them onto 9th and to Rock Creek. This is a flat map. You don't see where all the hills are on the topography. Topography would show that it goes downhill into the Wet Weather Creek, which already is an issue for all the houses on either side of that, because the city is supposed to come and clean that out. They don't as often as they should. Now you're adding double the homes that are there already. So that's going to add to some issue. As he was talking about the increase in traffic on 10th, you've got the increased water damage, the increased traffic that is a residential road. It's not going to, it's going to, it's going to have a lot of wear and tear, a lot of damage done. You're going to be out there a lot doing some maintenance. The way that it is for the emergency exit, that sounds like a better main exit to be used for those 88 homes. That way, it's just for those 88 homes. You're not doubling the traffic, especially like John had pointed out with school in session and things like that. As you're building these homes, you've got on this road, I don't know if you guys have been out to see this road, but this road is a blind hill. You cannot see on top of that hill, Green Bridge Road. When you're going up this hill, this is the view. Now, in our neighborhood, it is a one-way. What you're proposing is that you come off of 10th Street and make an intersection. you're creating an intersection on a blind hill that also floods and ices. That's going to show a lot of concern, especially when you do have school children coming and going during all the building, when you've got these semi trucks, the concrete trucks, the brick trucks. We also have restrictions in Stone Ridge. Some of those restrictions do include semi truck traffic and parking. Now you're asking people who specifically live there for our restrictions to forego those while people are coming in and out of there. I was wondering if at least that we could work with this new development. And when they create their covenants and their restrictions, to at least pair in with ours so that our residents don't have to forego what they have voted in and filed with the county, their restrictions and their rights. I do know that it is part of the planning unit development and the county commission to impose standards and requirements to protect adjoining properties from adverse effects. So I'm hoping that that's something that we get done here and understand and hear us all out. Thank you.
Thank you. Have one more for the audience before we ask for some responses. Sir, I think did you have your hand up right there, sir? Yes.
My name is Rick Tucker, 803 East Stone Ridge Drive. We've lived in Stone Ridge for about 7 years, and I have several concerns, mainly in two categories. The first category is how it's going to affect traffic on 10th Street. As it's already been stated, with the additional homes, creating an intersection right there on 10th Street, I think is going to really tie things up. It's going to be a lot more cars through that space, morning and night and all through the day. And we're probably looking at, with building those houses and building that subdivision out, probably looking at 3 years of moving in heavy equipment, earth moving equipment, construction equipment, building these houses. So it's going to tear up the road. We're going to constantly be going through mud and gravel, and just the added traffic right there. I think it's a really bad idea. I don't see that is going to really work and benefit anybody that's in Stone Ridge tying in on 10th Street. Then my second main concern is the arterial roads. I don't know if you've driven those roads or not. You've got Greenbridge, you've got Riverside, and then when you go across the bridge, you've got River Bluff. I can't imagine all the construction equipment traversing any of those roads on a daily basis or on a regular basis. 2 days ago, I was driving down Riverside going home, come around the curve, and somebody is coming really fast the other way and cutting the corner. That happens a lot. And if you have big equipment on these roads, there's going to be accidents. And if anybody has driven up River Bluff, something was said earlier about there wasn't any need to improve roads because of this subdivision. That road needs to be improved without the subdivision. It's awful to drive that road. We've met large trucks on there and you almost get pushed off the road. So if you have a constant flow over a period of time of large equipment, large trucks coming through there, I'm really concerned that there's going to be accidents. Now, if we have accidents right at Greenbridge and 10th, how will emergency equipment get around that to get to this proposed access? And if that's blocked, how can an ambulance get in? How could a fire truck get in? And that doesn't take into account also that during the day, we've got school buses, we've got delivery trucks, garbage trucks, mail carriers. There's a lot of traffic that flows in and out of there for the 53 houses that are in Stone Ridge. So to add that many more is going to create a real problem.
Thank you very much. Cameron, would you want to bring up either Public Works or OSRD or whatever you think best at this point to answer some questions?
Yeah, probably best to bring in the applicant's engineers here as well, so they can
Oh,
address some
very
very
good.
concerns as well. But yeah, everything that was hit on is in the staff report, utility wide. We talked about capacity and locations and require future easements potentially to get access to those utilities from private property owners in the extensions. And typically, we all require a looping or redundancy of a water main, whether that's a development or just a pad site or commercial site, depending on what the existing condition is. So that is addressed in our staff report, depending on once they get into full design. Utility plans to further evaluate that. Yeah, definitely traffic concerns. I want to bring those experts up for that. Emergency entrance and access. Again, we evaluate that with the Ozark Fire District. That access would have to be developed and designed to support fire truck access and load. So if there isn't a reason to get up there, they could access that. The easements, do not allow for you to build fences and gates in those for emergency access. And if you do, then they could be just knocked out by the fire district. It's up to the owner to go back. Yeah, we wouldn't permit those in these access points. Again, stormwater was addressed in the stormwater report. Stormwater in a development, you cannot release any more that releases today. So those detention basins have to be designed to accommodate that. So it wouldn't release any more today. It holds that water back in the basin until time that it can slowly release. I'm trying to go on through the intersection at 10th. That is the logical place because that's where Ridge Fork lines up as well. So it's a 4-leg intersection. And in the study and report findings, it did recommend the maintenance, if you will, or the improvements for sight line, site visibility, of cleaning out some of those areas and then opening up those spaces and maintaining site triangles on the developer side of the intersection so they can keep those open for visibility. Moving on forward. The 10th is a public street for City of Ozark. City of Ozark owns and maintains that street. Greenbridge is an Ozark Special Road District street, so they own and maintain that street. On, I think that hits the highlights of everything.
Conservation.
I'm not sure on the conservation. That's something I have to look into. That's on private property. I'm not sure what the requirement is for city to maintain that. Again, that's something I have to look on. That's not even on this property or not related to this application. If there's anything else, we'd be happy to pull up the applicant's engineer. Our city engineer is here as long as our road district's engineer to further address the stormwater.
Okay, we'll wait on the engineers and stuff. Sir, you may step forward.
My name is Michael Bloom. I'm a prior Ozark Special Road District Commissioner. I live at 2596 North Riverside Road. So basically that brown house right across from the Riverside Inn Park. I understand the overall problems associated with trying to develop in this area because I understand River Bluff is an Ozark Special Road District road. I understand Greenbridge is an Ozark Special Road District road. I understand the complexities of trying to work with that entity as well as your own entity to come up with this plan. I also am fully aware that this is not the only plan that's on the books. My one question is, I don't know who would answer this initially before I can really proceed with anything more that I have to say is, who is the one that determines legally that having one ingress and egress for this subdivision is met from a safety perspective? Like, who is the entity that actually determines that? Because we have a city ordinance that requires every subdivision to have 2 public ingresses and egresses. So I'm trying to figure out who determines that.
Would you
I'll
like to
go ahead and
comment?
start. It's not necessarily a city ordinance. It is actually the building code, the IBC IRCs. It requires anything over 30 homes to require a second access easement or access point. But it's up to the authority to have its jurisdiction. And so at the time that these happen, depending on the circumstances and site specific information, the authority does have jurisdiction to either require only 1 or require 2 or provide as far as a emergency access. And if a developer doesn't provide a second access, and it still is required by the whether it's the city or the fire district, there is the option for developer to sprinkle a home based on the fire code. So any homes over 30 could be sprinkled to be satisfying the 1 access point.
So in other words,
Does that answer your question?
well, in a way, it presents me with the information that I want to return with. So I watched routinely, I spent 3 years as a commissioner on the Ozark Special Road District. I watched multiple subdivisions be presented and for many options to be given how they were going to give road access to the residents. I have the special benefit of being a previous resident of Stone Ridge as well because I lived in that subdivision. I want to point out that you specifically stated that building code says that any subdivision over 30 homes should have 2 ingresses and egresses. That's your own thing, but you have the ability,
I also added that, but I'm not getting it back and forth.
No.
So,
apologies.
Please, direct
Yes.
direct to me and then I'll bring him in if necessary.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
Thank you.
So the point is that I've also routinely, as a special road district commissioner, watched the city of Ozark twist that little loophole and allows for subdivisions to be put in place that really should have a second ingress and egress. And I'm going to point out that this is not 80 homes going on one ingress. This ingress and egress already has 65 homes on it. That's a problem. And the second egress for emergency purposes is further away from emergency services. And it's not even a full-time access. And by definition, and we can also bring up Toth Engineering to discuss the traffic nature of that. This is a convenience thing for the residents that live in these communities. This is not for emergency services only. And I've watched the city of Ozark twist that little loophole, and they put locked gates to give a second egress because it meets the minimum legal standard of that requirement. But it's not the intent. It's not the spirit of why that ordinance was created or why we employ that. Is that my 5 minutes? Am I done? Or I don't know. Oh, my bad. I don't know. I don't want to make anybody mad at me. But the point is that too many times as a part of leadership in this community, I watch people trying to do the minimum to meet the minimum standard instead of meeting the spirit and an intent. I live in this community. I've got some extra things that I can suffer really special negatives from this development, but I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the fact that I know that I had 65 neighbors living in Stone Ridge that already didn't have adequate access, especially whenever the river rises, because we have to go all the way around on Hawkins Road to get out. It adds 20, 30 minutes to our trips. I've watched members of my own subdivision get in accidents with the school buses on Hawkins Road because the road is only 18 feet wide. This is not this developer's responsibility to address Hawkins Road or River Bluff Road, as was mentioned. It's not their responsibility to improve Greenbridge Road, but it is our responsibility as a community to tell them, no, we cannot have this be an addition. Now, I do know because we don't have the road structure to support this exact plan. I know that there's another plan that they've been presented with to where there would be a second egress put down to the south, tying into River Bluff, not River Bluff. What's Country Crest Road, but they don't own the rights to that land. And I'm asking as a citizen, because it would benefit me greatly, to have an egress that would get me to Country Crest, because whenever the water rises, we would still be able to get out by the park because Johnny Morris and the city has done a wonderful job of improving the intersection at 3rd and McCracken. Like wonderful things have been done to our system that we used to be just stuck everywhere. This is a way that we can create a new connection. And I believe it's the developer's responsibility to give their citizens that they're building a community for a second egress and not setting them up for instant failure the first time that a flood rises and you've got 100 homes with people that did not know that they were buying a flood-locked home. It's a lie. And also with the traffic studies, I've watched lots of those traffic studies go in front of me. Not one of those traffic studies takes into account what you're going to do with all of these citizens, including River Mist and everybody else, when the water rises. It's only 2 or 3 days out of the year. Granted, believe me, I live in the house that gets the water. I'm the one that gets flooded out. But you have to understand those 3 days, they can end people's lives if a fire truck can't get there. I watched the ambulance go off the road on Hawkins Road at our last high water event 2 years ago because they couldn't get there. Somebody called for help and they couldn't get there. So as a community, we're not prepared for this subdivision to go in where it is. We're not, because Hawkins isn't ready for it. River Bluff is not ready for it. But if they create the connection as a part of their plan, which is something that also has stormwater benefits for them, which I hope you guys are aware of as well. I hope that they've talked about this alternative plan with you. 1 minute, okay. There's a better way of doing this. And every engineer that's in this room that is a traffic engineer, that is not here to honor the spirit of our legal guidelines, but actually the spirit of what engineering is and like what's the best traffic ingress, egress, traffic flow, what's the spirit, what's the intent, what are we going to do for our community? That's why we serve. What are we going to do for our community? We have to tell a developer no when it's not the best for our community. This is going to happen. I acknowledge that. And it doesn't bother me. I'm actually happy to see homes go in, but the roads have to be there. The stormwater plan has to be there. And the stormwater plan solved if they purchase the access to get to Country Crest, because then they have access to the dry creek. But that will also have to be addressed by the city, because the city's responsibility is clearly to clear out that wet weather creek. Sorry, my terminology sucks. I apologize. Thank you for your time. Please consider the spirit of why we do things instead of the letter of the law. We twist things by the letter of the law too often these days. What's best for our community, please take that to heart. Thank you.
We need to bring up, anybody talk about traffic or?
Yeah, you could bring them up. It made reference to another plan that shows the connection south that we don't have or in a report, so I'm not sure what that is. Maybe the applicant can address that, but we don't have a plan that shows an alternative route.
You want to address the additional application or, excuse me, plan that has been mentioned?
We don't have another application. Part of this application, and does include at the county's or the city's request, a stub out road so that a development to the south could connect through here, not only through here onto 10th, but also through here south. We don't own the property to the south. We did actually, it is a measure to try and make stormwater a little bit easier to your comments and for transportation. We did try and acquire additional properties that it was no interest. But we did agree to a stub out going south to allow future connectivity running from this neighborhood south. And that is, I forget the name of the road, but I believe it's 14th Street going south. It goes vertically in this project, this one. So if you're on the screen there, the vertical road through the middle goes right from the emergency access, then it goes straight south. There's an easement that would be built right there.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
but we don't have any plans. We don't have anything drawn that does anything other than this.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to request somebody from Tove Engineering to be able to speak to all this.
We'll get to him in a little bit. You bet. Anyone else from the audience?
Jeannie McBall, 1324 East Warren Avenue, Ozark, Missouri. My question is, you passed a bill and sent it to City Council. It was bill number 3487, the end of September. I know this gentleman has been in the works for over 6 months working on this file. But you passed a requirement, sent it to City Council, and it will be up for a vote Monday evening that says it's required to have a swimming pool and a pool house amenities with 76 lots or more. This isn't addressed in here. And then the very last page, if City Council signs it, it says it will be full force effect after passage and approval. So if they approve it, then how are you going to work out this with the developer that's been here all this time? Because this is going against the ordinance that you already passed. If there's an ordinance that says that somebody is grandfathered, I want the number for it.
Don't believe that's the case. Cameron, you'll know more about.
She's making reference to an ordinance that the commission approved
In September.
please, a month and a half or so ago that is yet to be adopted by the board. I have addressed to the board that there are some applications in process that staff does not recommend making them go back and adjust this or address this. However, this one would be exempt anyway, because this is not RSF 1 or 2 by zoning, which that ordinance addresses. This is still R1B, and they're not rezoning this property. So there are a few tracts of land, if they are wanting to develop as the zoning exists. When we adopted our new RSF 1 and 2 a year back, we addressed that these are grandfathered in, or they will stay in place, that they can develop per the old ordinance, but they don't have to go back and rezoning. So regardless if that bill is approved by the board, it would not affect this because they're not changing the zoning request.
That makes sense.
It does for this, but the other ones that are in effect, that haven't been approved yet, that have made application? What is the ordinance that allows them not to go by the new bill?
But it'll have to be approved first,
Correct.
as an RSF 1 or RSF 2. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
I did not quite understand.
Yeah,
Are we
so-
retroactive back?
Staff has asked that when the board adopts this, that anyone that is in process already has made an application. I mentioned to the board that we have a handful that's in the system now, to not adopt it where those are required to go back and redesign and resubmit to bring back for the commission or the board. And so hopefully they adopt that where it will not have any effect on the ones currently in the system. But again, they have yet to adopt that ordinance. So we have no answer specifically to how that'll come to play.
So it'll be entirely up to the Board of Aldermen whether to make it retroactive or not at the time.
Okay, so they would have to amend their bill that they have.
Pardon?
They would have to amend the bill that they have in place to do that.
I believe that would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Anyone else from the audience? We don't want to miss anyone.
Yes,
Yes, sir. Step forward.
Chairman, Commissioners, Caleb Berger, I live at 810 East Stone Ridge Drive. I'm a senior project manager for a commercial industrial general contractor. It's been in business for over 30 years in the Springfield area. I understand that this is a preliminary plat. But as a project / construction manager, it's our job when we get initial plans to pick them apart and figure out what's going to be the best for our owner that we're trying to provide a service for. There's a lot better ways that we could be doing this for the constituents there in Stone Ridge that are my neighbors, and for the potential homes that are going to be going in here. You got a 3.5 acre detention basin. That's going to be the east detention basin on the map. There's almost a 6 acre lot below that. So one question I would have is, what's the future plans for that lot? There have been some other developers in this area that have built beautiful subdivisions and put up 4-story apartment buildings right below them after they've sold all those homes. So that's a concern for me from a development standpoint. It's not that I'm against this development going in. I think there's a better way that we could do it. I know that there was an application that was, I don't even know if it got to you guys. There was plans for this same piece of property a couple of years ago to do 3 acre lots with $1 million homes on it. That would be a lot more acceptable, I think, to the members of Stone Ridge behind me. Don't cram them in, you know, spread them out a little bit, even if it ain't that big of a house, but just spread them out. There's a lot of homes going into a small area. That west detention basin there, if you look at the flow rates on that, if I'm reading the engineering studies that are done if I'm reading them correctly, the current flow rate down the side of that hill right now is 90 cubic feet a second. The peak flow, or the 100-year floodplain of that basin, if it's built like it's stated, would be almost, I think it was 204 cubic feet a second. That's over double. We all know that area gets a 100-year flood about every 4 years. What's that going to do to that hillside? What's that going to do to the road beds? None of them are designed to take that kind of change and impact and almost double. So that's where the recommendations, you know, would be coming in to redo those road surfaces. I understand that it is up to the authority have us during jurisdiction on the second access. In the city of Springfield, that's the Springfield Fire Department. They would never fly for this. They would make the city planner's office put in a second road. I'm also a prior firefighter. I was a lieutenant with the Ebenezer Fire Department, which is the largest fire department in Greene County, serving over 137 square miles. You get one bad fire at a bad accident or at a bad intersection, has a heart attack. Now you got 2 fire trucks staged out trying to pump down a house fire. You can't get the ideal spot to bring in a second access. I know it cuts right through that almost 6 acre lot down there, but that's a perfect ideal. Even with the train, you look at the topo map, you got a little bit of grading to do, but it's ideal. And then you bring it in the backflow, and now, upgrade 10th if you want. Bring a road in there. The only thing with doing that is How many of you have drove up that when it's got a 1/4 inch of ice on it? If you don't got a 4-wheel drive pickup and a good head start, honey, you ain't making it. And that happens every year where we have residents that can't make it up that hill. So in closing, I encourage you, Chairman, Commissioners, take a hard look at this. I think that we all can work together. But government is for the people, by the people. You're the government. These are the people. I encourage you to listen to your people that voted y'all in. Have a good evening.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I'll be short and sweet. Amy Acker, 1549 East Greenbridge Road, Ozark. Ozark my whole life. I would like to know more about the plans for the water flow. We are on the river. We've got 90 acres on the river. My parents built 2 years next to us. And then my sister and her husband live right there at the base of the south side of the bridge. So my entire family is right there. My parents and I are both not in the floodplain, but we are very, very close. So I would like to know more about what the water flow is going to be without, all the vegetation up at the top of the hill there. I'd like to know how the water flow is not going to affect our property and what the plan is for that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm Benjamin Lyle, 1543 East Greenbridge, the 5-acre lot that's in the middle of all of that. You may notice that's our property. So I guess, how much this will influence your decision, I don't know, but clearly this will change everything for us. We're on well water currently. That's not tenable with that neighborhood there, of course. We'll have to alter that. Obviously, we have a very unusual easement situation through that as well. So how that complicates this, you'll have to speak to better, but our property's easement access to our property runs through the property with the planned subdivision here from our lot there. So that currently is a driveway that is an easement through that as well. So, this obviously would change a lot in terms of our property and in very substantive ways, not just aesthetically having, a large neighborhood there. But I think also the runoff and all those other issues there are a concern as well for us in that area. But the easement, obviously, I don't know what the solution is, or I've not heard any plans as to how that would be addressed with our easement through the planned subdivision. I don't know if that was addressed. Sorry, it's a little late before I got here. Okay. Yeah, so that's my main question. Obviously, we, from a technical standpoint, legally, we would need to still have access to our property, and how that would be affected would be important to us, but that's a part of it. Yeah.
We'll get that answer.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. We bring Jeremy up for the traffic. Just answer some of these questions. Maybe
Yeah,
Jeremy first.
Yeah, by bringing him up, just whichever one wants to come up first, and even the applicant might address you in the access easement as well.
Did you want to speak first? Come ahead, ma'am. We'll get you and then we'll.
Victoria Lyle, sorry.
Victoria Lyle, I'm at 1542 East Greenbridge Road. That's my husband. I just want to follow up. I don't have this packet, so I don't know page numbers, but it's easier to see where we are if you go back to where you can see, like, I don't know if it's page 12. Yes. Okay, so see that right there? That's us. That's my house. You can't see my kid's playground on it in that map, but what this emergency access is our driveway, and it is an easement. We currently have an electric gate at the end of that we pay the power to run. We currently pay to mow all down there that we don't own it. I can speak to the ice every year that builds on that road and how it becomes impassable. This is why our first year here, we bought a pickup truck from my husband to drive because it was very clear. Our Corolla was not going to make it. Obviously, as he said, aesthetically, it is heartbreaking to think of looking out and seeing 88 houses instead of the deer. I know that's an appeal to emotion, and that doesn't necessarily have much value. But when it comes practically for us day to day, obviously there's a lot that we are considering with this proposal. But one of our main initial concerns is that we will still be able to get to our house. That is our one and only way, that driveway. That is our easement. I don't know if this goes through and construction starts, are we supposed to expect giant construction vehicles driving up there? How close will they get? To what degree do we need to be concerned about that? I'm just gonna take a guess that if this neighborhood goes through, probably there we can expect some residents to use the emergency access, whether they're supposed to or not. That is a practical concern for us, obviously. And when it comes to emergency vehicles, good luck getting up there when it's icy. We spend a lot of time this last winter, every winter, multiple times. My husband would go with his truck and a shovel and just be hitting on that ice with ice melt. It is a chore. And if that's going to be an emergency access, I'm not sure how that will work. I would like more information on that because that also will be, obviously that's our emergency access as well, since it's the only way to our house. And that is for sure one thing I would like more information about. And how do we get, so are all of these documents, are these on the planning and zoning website? Are these things we can get access to?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll look at that, but that would be my main concern right now. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. You want to speak to that access easement? You tell me if I get out of line here. I don't.
Yeah, happy to. The emergency access, and it sounds like you were a little bit late. That's a emergency access that would be gated on the neighborhood side up where the houses are, sort of south of, even further south in that area, to restrict that specifically and only to emergency vehicles. And I don't know if it's the same term here as it is where I'm used to, more familiar doing this, but we would probably put a Knox box key on there so that it's not something that can be unlocked. I mean, you can unlock anything with a bolt cutter, but so it'd be Knox box accessible. That would prevent the residents from using it as a regular access way and protect the driveway for the homeowner that the two owners that just spoke. So that would end up getting built to address a comment earlier that I think that Cameron addressed. It's not an easement. That would be a built drivable road approved by the Department of Emergency Services and would have to go all the way and tie in, and then it would be, again, not locked out with a Knox box. Okay. Does that help? Just one more further comment. Happy to share as many details as we can right now with those particular homeowners regarding distances. Sometimes the plans have a lot of detail and there's missing detail that people may want that aren't, there's not a measurement there that shows distances or what plans are. From the rear of those houses on the north side and on the east side are retention basins that are intended to be completely natural and stay that way as one of the stormwater measures. So there is a reasonable distance. Obviously, the view all the way up the hill is going to change, but directly up against the driveway is intended to be completely untouched, with the exception of the access road.
Okay. Cameron, come ahead. Can we speak to the legality of the ownership of the easement? I think that was your question, correct?
I don't know that staff could speak to the legality of that. I mean, it is an access easement for them and they are maintaining that access easement. With the initial discussions with the fire district, the the driveway that's there existing was adequate enough to support their truck, and that's usually the fire districts are the number one that we go to because they have the largest equipment. And he addressed that as it veers off that existing drive and goes into their development, they would further develop that access. So that the existing access easement, it sounds like, will be untouched and will remain as it is today. And they won't put a gate until they're on their kind of off the drive and beyond the drive.
Okay. Did that answer, this is kind of out of the norm, but did that answer your question, sir, on ownership of the easement to get to your home?
Sorry. say that.
I'm trying to answer your question on ownership of the easement to get you to your home that you're concerned about. Did that answer your question, or we need to get some further information?
Not entirely. I guess the question, yeah, where it comes off matters, and if the current security structure will be changed in some way, you know, that's fine for the residents, but obviously we would have to have access to that. And where we have our current gate that's coded, you know, that obviously is a barrier that we've paid to to paid the bills on it, everything, and mowed all that, and, you know, chainsaw trees out of the way. That prescriptive easement, will we still be able to have that gated and coded there, or will we have to have that moved at, say, our own expense, which seems unreasonable, to a location closer to our property, so that where their easement comes off for this access goes to the neighborhood, as they're saying, like it would kind of come off of that. So I don't see, I see the broad answer, but I don't see the answer in specific terms to how that would work, which I think is a legal obligation. I understand.
You have to refer to.
Yeah, that would be,
For that,
that
I'm
would,
assuming.
well, wouldn't necessarily be the city's legal. That would be more of a civil legal between them, because that access easement is on the applicant's property that's granted to their property. If there's a key code and lock there now, I'd imagine that easement would need to give that to both property owners so that they're guaranteed to have the access. But again, that would be an issue that's drafted in that easement, what they can and can't do. That would be amongst the two of them. But by rights of the easement, it should dedicate easement or access for the applicant as well, because it's on their property.
Okay, so I guess suggestion would be you to work with the.
Yeah.
Owner / engineer, correct? Is that what we're saying? He needs to work with you to work that out. You want to comment, please?
Yeah. So just want to ensure the property owner that access, of course, would be continued. It's a granted easement. We would both have to agree to remove it. Our understanding, the gate was installed years ago by the Carters. Maintenance of it and built electricity has been taken over by the property owner of the house. Gates on our property. I think it's more than likely that we'll have to work that out under some approval by emergency services to make sure. I mean, in my eyes, we would leave everything as is. We would gate our side. And if they needed to have access, like if there was a secondary code so that they can get in there, but leave the gate there, I think that would probably be the most common sense solution. The course have to be cleared by emergency services, but it's, as Cameron indicated, it's probably something that the two of us would have to get work out under some approval path.
Okay.
But, you know, certainly don't want to restrict or change access. But
Yeah,
again,
that's where we're headed. That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. But anyone, yes, sir.
Hey, evening, Chairman, Commissioners. Scott Mertz, 902 East Ridge Court. So I'm on the cul-de-sac that's future, it could be a four-way intersection. Just want to second everything that's been talked about the roads. But I do have a question when it comes to occupancy of the future subdivision and the school systems in Ozark. Is this process take that into account of already strained school system, East Elementary, Middle School, and the future development of 88 homes plus, you know, how many more kids that are going to go to East? That's my only question. I don't know if this process takes that into account or if you co-plan with the school district at the same time.
The city, I can comment that the city of Ozark is in constant communication with the school system. Hadley is actually a teacher.
The long range planning right now, so you're at the long range planning meeting, I think it was 2 weeks ago Tuesday.
Okay.
They've taken that into account, like there was a person that spoke for probably an hour and a half. And they went through all the subdivisions that are coming, so obviously they're aware that, you know, north right now or west right now is basically, the swamp.
Yeah.
And they know that it's coming back south with the new infrastructure that's going in south of Walmart. They know about some of the new things that are going east. So when you look at your numbers, they're taking that into account and knowing that east is probably going to grow by 40 to 50 kids about 5 or 6 years out. And the school district's taking that into account when they're putting in new buildings and kind of going forward, like how we added the OIC a couple of years ago and adding on right now the middle school and some of that stuff. But the school district I definitely encourage you to go out to the long range planning meetings next Tuesdays, I think, or next one or 2 Tuesdays from now, but
Yep.
definitely address some of those, but that whole process is in there. It also should be online through the school website.
Okay, so the results of this don't get automatically transferred over there to say,
No, I mean,
They're already
went through
looking.
all that.
Okay.
They went through all the presumptive, things that haven't even made it to us here.
Okay.
Like the person that went through, he basically went through and said, hey, there's this possibility here, and like, they went through, so they know about things that won't even reach us for 2 or 3 years, like you went through those subdivisions. And stuff. So,
okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Jeremy, would you please come forward? I don't overstepping my bounds, am I? And I think specifically maybe speak to whatever you want to speak to. But I think what needs to be addressed possibly.
I always want to give the applicant and their engineer the time that they need to explain these things, but I think Cameron's done a wonderful job. I did hear something that I want to address with the water and sewer. We do take into full account the projected volume that will come off of this subdivision and how we can, from a sewer standpoint, a lot of you all may have seen that we just recently did some improvements at what we call the Riverside Inn lift station. So we do have the capacity there. The water is something that a full hydraulic analysis, what we're after is to make sure that it can feed all these homes and it can protect them from a fire flow standpoint. So we give them the data they need to run the hydraulic analysis. And then remember, everything has to go to DNR. This is not something that Cameron just flips a switch and it goes. DNR is the regulating body there. They look at the data and then they move forward or don't. They either grant continuing authority or they say you can't have it. But based upon our hydraulic analysis, the flow test, I will say that that area has adequate water pressure and flow. But I think the other stuff was kind of weeded itself out. I did hear some things that I think it's already been answered. Anything specific for me?
Jeremy, can you just, for people who don't know you, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I know we know you.
I'm
For everybody.
sorry. Jeremy Parsons, I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Ozark. And I used to be the planning director, and I don't envy Cameron's job right now. But
Or do we? Okay. Well, I'll turn it over to the commission shortly. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yep.
The engineer, would he want to speak to the traffic report? Or not? I guess that's up to you.
This engineer did not do the traffic
Oh,
report.
okay.
This is Eric Hodge with Roselle Engineering Survey Company out of Branson. We prepared the preliminary plat that you have on screen and also performed this preliminary stormwater report. The traffic impact study was performed by a traffic consultant out of Springfield. As a civil engineer, I can tell you that traffic studies are performed utilizing national standards. And so although I was not involved in the preparation of this traffic impact study, I do know that a reputable traffic consultant did perform the study. That study was submitted to the City of Ozark. Their review engineer reviewed it, and also the Ozark Special Road District's review engineer reviewed it, and both of those review engineers approved the traffic study with the results that were recommended. So that's all I have to say about that. In regards to, Jeremy kind of stole my thunder on the water and sewer. I should have beat him up here to the podium. What a lot of people don't realize, at the preliminary plat stage, we haven't worked out all the nitty-gritty details that the engineers, just live and thrive on, cranking all the numbers when it comes to water and sewer capacity. Jeremy's exactly right. There's going to be a very detailed and elaborate process moving forward where we provide sanitary sewer discharge numbers and water consumption numbers to the City of Ozark. There's going to be an evaluation as to whether or not the city system has adequate capacity for both potable water, fire protection, and sanitary sewer collection and treatment. So that is the natural part of this. As Jeremy said, it also, besides calculations in my office and being reviewed by the city of Ozark and the city's review engineer, that ultimately has to go to the Department of Natural Resources for their approval and issuance of a construction permit. So we can't just take Jeremy out to lunch, buy him off, and start construction the next day. Everything has to go through the state of Missouri. In regards to stormwater, some kind of very concerning comments were made, and I totally understand that from a homeowner's perspective. But they have to understand that stormwater detention basins will be constructed, and the whole point of a detention basin is to manage the runoff. And ultimately, as that water exits those two detention basins, we still have to comply with City of Ozark's regulations. So there's no way that we can just discharge all that water from the West Detention Basin into North 10th Avenue. City codes would never allow that. City codes limit how much water you're allowed to flow on the surface of the pavement. And the reason for that is to allow not only the average citizen, but also emergency vehicles to traverse those streets. So whether we discharge water into the street or behind the street or find some other route, that entire process will be reviewed by the City of Ozark, the city's review engineer, and we're not going to be able to do anything that's going to violate those regulations. There was a comment made about the stormwater draining to the east onto that 5.5 acre tract that has not been developed. That's actually on the other side of the hill, so that statement was actually not totally accurate. The private drive that we're going to be using as an emergency access, I shouldn't say we're going to be using, the City of Ozark's emergency vehicles may be using, that actually runs up kind of the high point. So the east detention basin will discharge towards the east, and that water will not drain north onto lot number 89, which is that 5.5 acre tract. So it will drain to the east to the natural drainage way where the water drains right now. So the stormwater will be managed per City of Ozark regulations. Did you guys have any questions for me as a civil engineer?
I'll open it up to them. If we do, we'll call you back. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name is Mark Acker. I'm at 1549 East Greenbridge Road. If you could possibly go back to the other map, I want to say they said it was page 9, but yeah, that's a good one. We can. So our house is located in the very northeast corner up there. And one thing I wanted to speak to in regards to storm drainage specifically, it's already an issue. A couple places, actually, it's both the northeast corner and the northwest corner. The entrance to Stone Ridge, and there's that private drive right next to it. Large amounts of water, anytime there's a heavy rain, are running across the road. Large amounts of gravel, yard debris, mulch that are carried out and deposited across the road into our property right now. And it's every time there's a heavy rain, you could not walk across the front of the entrance of Stone Ridge without getting your feet wet. It's a large amount of water that's already flowing onto the road as it is. So I don't believe there's currently adequate storm drainage. So that's something that I hope is addressed. As far as the northeast corner, where it runs into that dry creek under the bridge and onto our property, again, large amounts of water. We currently have a collection of 7 tires that apparently in this wooded area, there's a place where there was maybe garbage or something in the past, but many times over the years when there's a heavy storm, large amounts of debris come in under that dry creek, under that bridge and into our yard. And, you know, to give an idea of the amount of water we're talking about, the hill there that sits between our dry creek and the river, we've watched it over the last couple decades go down a couple feet from the large amounts of water that are coming through that dry creek and onto our property. So I am very concerned about more water going out to either one of those corners as it is currently. So that's a big concern for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Let me make sure no one else. You already got your time. You can come back. Did someone else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Obert. I'm at 2005 North 9th Avenue. I don't know if this is your responsibility, so I apologize for asking a very stupid question. There are going to be a lot of kids out here. Most of us are older. We have a few little kids in Stone Ridge, but not as many. One of my concerns is that when the work was done down by the park, there's no real way for us even to get down the hill into the park across. And I know that's not necessarily, again, the city's responsibility, but one of my concerns is children, an additional 80 some homes full of children trying to get down to the river to play, because who did, we all grew up doing that, I think. There's no sidewalks or anything. So is there any sort of consideration by the city to add some sidewalks or something if we're going to add this many more homes so that people can safely get to the river? I can see kids running out of these woods, and if you drive out there, it's solid woods down to Green Bridge. If they come running out of the woods, they're going to get hit by a car, and that terrifies me, and I don't want to bring emotion into your shop, but as a mom of 4 kids, that's very concerning to me. So I just want to know if there's any consideration for that.
We can address that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Within that R1B, what is the sidewalk
So,
determination there?
well, regardless, any subdivision, when there's a residential collector, sidewalks required on both sides, a residential local, which is generally not the main residential street, and there's street or subdivision that require sidewalks on one side. As noted in the staff report, we do identify the OTO trail along the western property line. We will work with the applicant. We have initially identified those through all the corridors as like a connection from point A to point B. But we do try to work with the applicant to meander that through or make it logical to getting across from A to B. So there would be a trail easement required. Our current ordinance doesn't require them to build the trail, but an easement is required to be granted with the plat. And then just to clarify, up Riverside and the old restaurant area, that Riverside Road, the prior alignment has been dedicated as a public trail. So now the new road is here. This is now a public trail system that ends. The city is working with the county, because a lot of this is in the county, to provide a trail connection further south down the park. But that's just a matter of time, and as development occurs, or as it becomes in the city, or as things push it up the pipeline to get it in pipe funding, but they would be responsible for building the sidewalks in the subdivision.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Let me get real quick. Okay, you got one more.
Michael Bloom, 2596 North Riverside Road again. First of all, regarding sidewalks, it's amazing and awesome that you're gonna have sidewalks inside of the subdivision. The concern was having access to the city park. You did not provide any solution for that. You just basically dead-ended a bunch of kids in a subdivision and still gave them no access. And then you directly referred to the OTO trail in the existing Riverside Inn Park. That is, like you said, a dead-end trail, but actually has no connection to anywhere. And there is no realistic plan, because the owners of the land, who are our current county collector, have no desire to sell that land to give access to the city park for any of these subdivisions. So those children have no option but to travel on Riverside Road on an already dangerous section, which they do during the summertime every single year. Feel free to drive out there. We dodge them all the time, try not to hit them. Most people adhere to the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. A lot of them do not. I get to watch the 70-mile-per-hour racers every single morning fly across the bridge and listen to them. Regarding all of the engineer's comments, public record, that gentleman is working for somebody who's trying to develop land and does not have any vested interest in our community. I would like to restate, I would like somebody from Toth Engineering, who is employed by the Ozark Special Road District, who is employed by our tax dollars on behalf of the citizens of this community, to talk about all the engineering concerns from an actual traffic perspective, to not look at engineering as meeting the minimum literal letter of the law to adequately support whatever application you've created and whatever loophole you're using to employ. And I'd like to re-infer this gentleman's point of view as working in construction in Springfield, that this subdivision would never be allowed in Greene County. And as a member of the Ozark Special Road District, I used the Greene County Road Commission as the model that I tried to move the Ozark Special Road District to, because they have such a great process in making sure that they're adhering to the best interests of the community. So this would never fly in Springfield. Why are we allowing it here? It's not safe for the children. And I would like to hear from the engineers that are employed by the citizens of our community, not by a developer who sold their land and then moved to Florida and now is trying to develop it with no ties to our community left. And that's who the Carters are.
Pardon?
The Carters.
Okay.
They sold all of the property, well, trapped a doctor in our community, landlocked him. Like, there's a lot of shadiness with this entire deal, that it can be done right. All these issues can be corrected if they're held accountable to actually not make every penny they can off of this property. But once again, I would request that Toth Engineering come and speak to the engineering concerns for the water runoff, for the traffic studies and everything else. If they are not up here, then we're not representing our community. We're only listening to an engineer that's employed by people who have cut and run. Thank you.
Let me get him first, please.
Good evening. My name is Matt Miller. I'm with Toth and Associates. We serve as the Ozark Special Road District Review Engineer. So when we're tasked with a plan review like this on behalf of OSRD, we look at two general things as far as it relates to OSRD's road system. Number one, does it meet, what are the traffic impacts going to be of the development on OSRD's roads? And number two, what is the stormwater impact to OSRD's right of way? And in looking at both those, we look at general engineering principles, but also the City of Ozark's code as a guiding principle, since most of the development is going to be happening within or very close to the City of Ozark. In this case, we reviewed both the stormwater engineering report provided by the applicant and the traffic impact study provided by the applicant. Some of the stormwater concerns that have been brought up tonight are very valid. We had some of the same concerns when looking at the design of particularly the western detention basin and the increase in peak runoff that was proposed coming out of that basin. In discussions with the city and with the applicant, it was determined that in order to move the preliminary plat forward to this process tonight, that they would be willing to construct downstream improvements in order to take care of that additional flow that would be coming out of that basin. And that would be, designed and then brought forward for final approval, during the construction plan process once the preliminary plat was approved. As far as traffic impacts go, this development doesn't actually connect directly to any of OSRD's roads. At this point, the only point of connection is to 10th Avenue. As has been brought up as a valid concern tonight, I think the only having one access point to the subdivision, that's not really something that's under the jurisdiction for OSRD to review. That would fall, under the City of Ozark's review and their third-party engineer. So while OSRD may or may not have concerns with only having one point of access, that's not really something that we're tasked with reviewing as part of our review process. So as far as the other traffic impacts to OSRD's roads, we found that the traffic impact study relieved us of any further concerns when it came to the impact to OSRD's roads. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay. I'll turn it over to the commission and we may call you back up.
All right.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll give you one more. Take your time.
I guess the question for the runoff, I didn't really get a good answer, so we're on well water currently. Are we going to have to pay to get some other situation should, you know, how that clearly is going to affect our water situation at our house. Having the neighborhood up the hill from it with the runoff from all these homes, it doesn't seem like it would be tenable to still have well water in that situation. How will that be addressed from connecting us to city water? Like what will be our option there? You know, is that a part of the plan?
I can't comment. Maybe
Yeah.
Cameron can make.
I'll start if I need to. The Public Works Director could further clarify, but at this point, this application doesn't affect, if they're on existing well and or septic, this application doesn't affect them. If in the future they start having issues, that is regulated by DNR as far as well and septics and the health department. And if determined that they can rebuild those, they will be allowed. If not, then they could be potentially required to connect to city infrastructure. And that's the case for any property that's neighboring a city infrastructure system. If they choose to want to connect, that's their opportunity where they can pursue that, but that's all on them and to activate that process if they don't have any current situations now that are of concern.
Yeah, you could understand that's a little frustrating. Yeah. The other thing is, can you go back? I just wanted one thing. I'm not sure where you pulled. Go back to, was it page 9? What was this is not really the actual property line currently as it stands right here.
These property lines are assessor maps and they're not exact. What we rely on is the actual survey data here. So this is the true property lines. And hit your parcels like here off the map.
Okay, so that's okay.
Have a question, please?
No, that's okay.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I will close the public portion of our meeting and I will turn it over to the commission for questions, comments. We can bring back anyone as far as Jeremy or the engineer or the applicant. Refer to Cameron for questions. The only thing I will mention is adverse to prior. I want to make sure everyone gets to speak towards this that wants to prior to a motion. Okay. I think I've done a bad job in the past of that, not making sure everyone gets a voice that they want to have. Okay. I don't want to miss anybody. We do need to use your microphone so we can make sure you get recorded properly. But I open the floor to the commission. Who wants to start? Chad.
I'll start. I have a few questions and I have, I guess, just some comments in general. Cameron, can you speak to the creek that was mentioned and where this creek is at and what responsibility, if any, that the city has for that creek?
There was some reference to a drainage way this side, and then there's kind of this drainage creek, wet weather stream, if you will, along the southern. The applicant property is the shaded in green, and then to the south is another vacant piece of land, and then south of there, there's this drainage way that's kind of off the map running through here. I know there's a conservation easement, but I don't know what the requirements are for who maintains, takes care of that. Something we definitely could look into, but it wouldn't have a bearing on this application necessarily. And I do want to point out too, anything that's shaded is in the city limits. If it's not shaded, it's still in the county. We have no jurisdiction.
Okay. Does the city, are there some existing conservation easements where the city is responsible? Is that a typical thing?
I'm gonna actually defer to Jeremy Parsons, the Public Works Director. I'm not aware of anything. Again, not aware of the details of this one, just because it's something that was in place quite some time ago.
Sorry, if you could repeat it. There's a lot of conversation.
I just was curious if the city has existing conservation easements or agreements where the city is responsible for maintenance of creeks or.
Yes, Chad, there's only one that I know of, and that's over on the backside of Barrington Springs. And that was our first conservation easement we went after, I think back in 2016.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any conservation easements along Rock Creek. And I'm not, and as Cameron said, you've got to, just like with anywhere in the city, there's city and then county land and the responsibilities. I have not been aware, Cameron, of any responsibility to Rock Creek either, as far as maintaining. And I believe a lot of that common area is actually, if you read the final plat, the HOA is who has the responsibility for that common area. Is that correct?
Generally, that is correct. The common areas are usually owned and maintained by the HOA or the developer. And so it's, again, that's something we can dig into in detail of that subdivision. I don't know if it's in Stonegate or the Country Crest or the subdivision just to the southwest of there, but that drainage way kind of meanders through there.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that kind of, that meets, you know, I think it'd be very unusual for cities to own and maintain common areas and subdivisions. So and it doesn't sound like that's typical. Maybe we have one, maybe we have two, but so I wouldn't see that that's typically a responsibility of the city to own and maintain. I live in a subdivision in Ozark that has common detention areas, and I know for sure that the city has no responsibility and no obligation to maintain those. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. Also, in my review of the traffic impact study, the study was done actually for 93 single-family homes. And I guess with the preliminary plat that's presented this evening, that obviously, I guess, has been scaled back to 88 single-family residential homes. So the study does assume a little bit higher, not much, but a little bit higher density than what the preliminary plat is proposing. And based on the conversation this evening, I mean, we've had, obviously, the traffic study was prepared by a licensed engineer, reviewed by the city's professional engineer, reviewed by Ozark Special Road District's professional engineer. I read through the entire study myself, not through all the appendices. I found it acceptable. I routinely review traffic impact studies, so I'm very familiar with them. I work with them on a daily basis, so I don't have any concerns with what's being proposed or recommended in the traffic study. And then just a couple other comments that I'd like to make. I guess just for clarification, and please correct me, Cameron, if I'm wrong, but this governing body has no authority to approve anything as far as a bill or an ordinance. We simply make recommendations to the Board of Aldermen, and then they would take action to approve that bill or not. So just because this board may make a recommendation to the alderman, it doesn't mean that they will adopt it. They may throw it out. They may whatever. So there's no existing ordinance that's already been passed for the pool and the single family residences.
Yeah, you're correct. All the recommendations for proposed bill, ordinance, applications such as this is a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. It'll go on for typically all applications take 2 readings. They go to the Board of Aldermen for first reading, for another official public hearing, and then the second reading is where they take official action. But yes, this is a recommendation what the commission proposes.
Thank you. You know, I think it's, you know, the subdivision obviously is required to put in sidewalks on the new city streets, and I think it's great that the city requires the easements for the future trails, which is, I mean, will come at a later date and improve the community. I don't think most communities require that those large easements for future trails and sidewalks. So there's a plan to get the connection to the trail systems and so forth. And so this is just one step towards that direction. And, you know, I don't have a lot of concern with the emergency access. It does provide, you know, 2 ways for emergency services to get in and out of the development. And obviously the fire department is agreeable to it. You know, I think, you know, development, like's been mentioned, development's going to happen here at some point or the other. You know, I think this one's, in my eyes, is reasonable. So.
Thank you, Chad. Anyone else? Comment, questions? Yes, Adam, please.
question for Cameron with the emergency access. Is there any minimum road requirement for what that would look like? Obviously, you know, there's an existing driveway there has been said that it's adequate. But what is the minimum requirement from breaking off that into lots 57 and 58?
Yeah, typically the fire code does require a minimum lane of 20 feet wide, or depending on the aerial apparatus, if it's required. A lot of times they'll evaluate that depending on the turning radiuses as well, and then the parking. But yes, there is a minimum code for construction of new emergency access lanes. But I did, as I conveyed earlier, initial conversations with the fire district, their initial impression thought this drive would satisfy. It may need some widening in the radius of their turns. But it would satisfy, they initially thought, for their fire code access.
Okay, and what about, are there any surface requirements?
The way and I can't remember the exact language, it doesn't require it to be paved. It has to be a stable and firm surface to support the capacity of the fire truck and as far as load and weight.
Okay.
So yeah, it doesn't really get into details exactly what the material is.
Right, I just didn't know if there was a minimum, and is there also a minimum for stormwater for that? Like if you're gonna have a paved road.
Yeah,
curb,
well, not necessarily in the fire code, but the stormwater calculations would have to take in all the impervious areas.
Okay,
So yeah.
that's what I want. Okay, also clarification, if there's an approval of the plat, obviously preliminary plat, if there's a chance through review and further engineering that the detention areas will be found inadequate, regulation requires them to become adequate. So, for example, if these detention areas were not adequate as of now, when they bump up against those regulations, that causes the plat to change to meet those requirements, correct?
That is always the potential, because the process we've adopted and followed for the preliminary plat to final plat, similar to most municipalities, is you get the preliminary plat approved. That gives the developer applicant the approval to proceed forward with the public infrastructure plans, which would include the streets, water, sewer, electric in some cases, depending on the electric utility provider, and stormwater. So once the preliminary plat would be approved in a scenario, that would release him to go into full design and details of working that out. And yes, there are some chances that something might not quite work. Maybe they've dedicated 5 acres for detention area. It could end up being 5.5.
Right.
They'd have to reevaluate that. And then depending on what that change is, if it substantially conforms to the preliminary plat when they go to final plat, that is administratively approved. But if they have to reconfigure a lot of the preliminary plat, it would come back as kind of a new process to the commission board.
Okay, and also just to confirm, approval of preliminary plat will still have to go to approval of a final plat in the future.
Yeah, so yes, the ordinance requires the commission to review and make a recommendation to the board of a preliminary plat. So it'll have 3 meetings for that process. Once, say, if a preliminary plat is approved by the board, then they'd go into the public or the infrastructure plans. Generally, that takes about probably 30 days to get reviewed and approved, assuming they've already kind of been in the works in some of those, and then maybe a year's time frame to actually build that. Once the infrastructure is completely constructed and signed off by all entities and approved, then they can make application for final plat. So generally, that is about a year past the approval preliminary plat. And then if that final plat conforms, then it is an administrative approval process and doesn't come back to public meetings.
Okay. Next thing I have is another question. Is there, remind me, is there, for the concerns of the flooding, especially of Riverside Road, is there public information as far as emergency, like for example, on the coast, there's emergency hurricane expressways and there's ways that are known. Does Ozark have a plan for roadways during floods as far as like emergency, emergency pathways that are known to the public, available to the public of if and when a situation occurs, basically, like an evacuation plan?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have that. I'll let Jeremy confirm or clarify. I know we do for emergency, snowplow routes.
Okay.
There's the primary routes that get hit first. But in this case, at this point, 10th Street is the only one that's city owned and operated. So we'd have to defer to the Ozark Special to see if they have a plan as well.
Okay.
I'm assuming through the E91 services, they might have a plan in place. The county as a whole kind of oversees a lot of the emergency access and management plans, and they might have something like that in place. But I'm not aware that we actually have a specific plan for a flood event and where to actually navigate those.
Right, evacuation plan, type service plan. And then my other question was, Riverside Road, who has jurisdiction over Riverside Road?
That's the Ozark Special Road District.
Okay, so that's also, okay. Sorry, I have a few more. I have, 3 questions, for the engineer from Roselle. Do you have a calculation for the average lot size?
Well, the minimum lot size is 15,000 square feet.
Correct.
I don't know if we identified an average lot size.
It seems to be quite a bit above that from what I'm.
Generally speaking, yes.
Yeah, okay. And then just because they're not labeled here, are you aware of the largest and smallest lot?
Well, the largest is a little skewed because it's
Sure.
lot number 89,
Right.
the 5.5 acres.
Okay,
Besides that, if it's kind of hard to read on the screen there.
right,
But the preliminary plat identifies the smallest lots as 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29.
okay,
And they are right at 15,030 square feet. So
okay,
just above the minimum. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots that are just above the minimum. And then, other than lot 89, I'm not aware offhand which one is the
Okay.
largest lot.
okay. And then Jeff, you can stop me if this question is not allowed, but if we could ask in your professional opinion, have you encountered any situations recently where Missouri stormwater regulations have been inadequate? Then in your professional opinion, you would like to see them maybe become more stringent?
Well, every time we do a project, we have a responsibility to protect public welfare. And so as a design engineer, really regardless of what the governing municipalities regulations are, I still have to protect the public's interest. Now,
Right.
in doing that, obviously the starting point is whatever entity has jurisdiction over the project that we're working on. At the example I gave earlier, I believe some citizens maybe had the concern that that west detention basin was just going to discharge directly into North 10th Avenue. And we just simply can't do that because that wouldn't be safe for the public to discharge all that water.
Right.
So, and just so it's been said, we did evaluate different stormwater alternatives, go in different directions. What's the best way to do that? And our client, the potential developer here, they don't have any control over offsite properties, so
Right.
perhaps there might be other options that are just not viable because they don't own that property. So we're bounded by what do we have control over and what do those regulations allow us to do?
Mhm.
So I guess a general answer to your question, everything we do, we're always looking for the best solution, not just for our client, but for everybody. Because at the end of the day, we sign and seal these plans. The state of Missouri holds us ethically responsible for what we sign and seal. So unlike a hired gun that shoots somebody and then just leaves town, we live here, we go to church here, we
Right.
buy our groceries here. So I'm probably going to meet you in the Walmart checkout line next week and I want to be able to look you in the eye.
Right.
So I can't do anything illegal or unethical or else they'll revoke my license.
Thank you. And one last question I had. Obviously, you're going to design a neighborhood for optimal lot structure. But could you address maybe how the road structure was decided based on the topography and the runoff?
Sure. Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say there's about 100 different layouts that we could come up with.
Sure.
for a lot layout.
I understand
Yeah,
that.
This is probably option 6 of 100 different possibilities. And I will say, in regards to the interconnectivity of the traffic patterns out here, the city of Ozark did suggest, and the applicant agreed, to provide access to the south. Mr. Farrell referred to that earlier. It lines up with 14th Avenue. Once again, we only control this property that's in question right now. Our only viable access is off of North 10th Avenue.
Right.
You know, fortunately, we do have the existing driveway that is able to be used as emergency access. And I think that's as simple as just adding a Knox box on that gate. So that the intention is no changes to that private drive. And we hope that it never has to be used by emergency personnel, you know, but if it is necessary, then we do have a second access to the subdivision. But if and when the property to the south is ever developed, we've already provided an opportunity for them to extend 14th Avenue south onto their property. And now currently that property is in the county.
Right.
So they'll work within the county's rules and regulations and, you know, most likely have to extend that road further south or west. And eventually, as all the properties develop, you know, I might say we've done another subdivision in Ozark that I personally have worked on the subdivision for over 20 years. We're now getting ready to start phase 4 of the subdivision. And as you develop each phase, you only can control what's in that phase. You stub a road out in anticipation of extending that road to the next phase. Well, now after 20 years, eventually all 4 of those phases are going to be developed and everything's going to be connected. So the goal is to plan ahead and make allowances for those extensions, but one individual applicant can't make all those improvements at one time because they don't control all of that property.
I think that's all I have for now.
Okay.
Before you sit down, I guess, since you're standing. Were you done at?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Right
Question as far as like runoff, you know, there's 2 retention areas. And of course, you can't just catch all the runoff from the entire property. But since they're on the west and east side, how do you measure how much runoff? Or maybe you can explain a little bit on the north side of it, the topography between the subdivision and then that north single family residence there. Is it on a hillside? Does his runoff go into the subdivision, or does the subdivision go to his property? How's that land layout?
Right, that's actually a great question. The property actually divides or it's divided into 4 cardinal directions. You know, there's a ridge top that runs to the property that generally separates it into an east northeasterly drainage area and a west southwesterly drainage area. So currently, whenever it rains, stormwater drains in all 4 directions, you know, 360 degrees from that property. So once again, as the design engineer, I have to protect the properties that are surrounding this. I can't just, for example, you know, Stone Ridge, I'm just not going to design a detention basin that just dumps all the water into somebody's backyard. That wasn't designed for that 10 or 15, 20 years ago. So I'm looking for where's the best and logical place to drain the water to. So what we did, thank you for putting that exhibit. That's an exhibit out of our preliminary stormwater report. And that identifies the existing natural drainage areas. So to answer your question, there is a portion of the site that currently drains to the north right now on that property. But what we had to do as we develop this property, we're collecting as much of the water as possible from the rooftops and the driveways and the yards onto the streets. It flows in the street on the surface and until we get close to the maximum allowable capacity within the street. Then we put in curb inlets, then we drain the curb inlets by putting in storm pipes. And so what we're trying to do is collect as much of the water and drain it to the northeast corner where there's already a natural drainage way. And then we did the same on the west side. Because we don't control the property to the south, we didn't have access to the natural low point to that you Cameron had mentioned as a natural drainage way that runs east and west south of the property in the county. We physically can't get our water over there off the west side of the subdivision. So we drained it to the northwest corner. So ultimately, when it's all said and done, it's entirely possible that there'll be less water that drains in some of the directions. For example, just due south or due north, because that water has been routed to the northwest detention basin and the northeast detention basin. And those flow rates that were referred to in the stormwater report, That's without detention. If you didn't put a detention basin in and you routed all of the west half of that subdivision, that's what you would see. But that's the whole reason why we put in a detention basin, is to attenuate that and reduce that amount of the rate of the runoff so it doesn't exceed the pre-development rate of runoff. So ultimately, when it's all said and done, around the perimeter of the subdivision, you may have maybe like the back half of the roof of a house and the backyard, that might drain onto the neighbor's property that's not detained. But when you compare that to those areas that are on screen now, maybe 4 or 5 acres that were draining on them before, just that little sliver of those backyards is probably generating less runoff.
Another question while you're here. The last gentleman that spoke, and maybe Cameron, you can pipe in on this. Matt had mentioned that there may be future downstream improvements that the developer would participate in. Is that something that's just not in this?
No, it
package,
is.
Or is it?
And
Which
that
I'm
actually,
assuming is off the property?
yes,
Or
sir.
is, okay.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
As was pointed out by some of the citizens, that Northwest Detention Basin is situated right there next to North 10th Avenue. And so somehow we have to safely get the water down or along North 10th Avenue and underneath Green Bridge and ultimately to the river. So those will be off-site studies that we have to do. Now, whether the water is in part carried down North 10th Avenue, perhaps it's carried completely behind the curb, maybe in a new ditch that we construct, maybe in road right of way. Then ultimately, once it gets conveyed down to Green Bridge, we'll have to probably add a culvert underneath Green Bridge to get to the north side of the road. I believe the second page of the executive summary, paragraph number 2, there has been a statement that has been inserted into that basically says it will be our responsibility if we increase the rate of runoff in that northwest corner, that we will have to evaluate the downstream existing conveyance system. And if there's any improvements that are necessary to convey any additional runoff that we've created, then we're going to be responsible to make those improvements.
How is that kind of determined? Is it determined after if this was approved, or how can you measure how much it's draining off? Can you do that prior to building? Do you have to build it all up and then see what kind of
Oh, no, sir.
residual drainage?
Right, that's a great question. It would be done during the design stage before construction. The reason why that hasn't been done yet is that's starting to get into the nitty-gritty details of the design of this development. And if this project is not approved going through this 3-meeting process, well then, that would be a moot point to go through that entire exercise. But step 1, to answer your question, we will perform an off-site survey of North 10th Avenue and the ground immediately adjacent to it. We will look at the discharge coming out of that Northwest Detention Basin. We'll evaluate if there is any remaining capacity in North 10th Avenue. I know there's no curb inlets or storm pipes there. Perhaps that's one option, is to add curb inlets or storm pipes, or maybe it's more cost effective or reasonable just to construct a grass line ditch behind the curb of North 10th Avenue. So we'll have to study different options and see what the city's in agreement with. And once we convey that water down to Green Bridge Drive, well then of course we'll have to work with OSRD to make sure that we design some sort of culvert underneath Green Bridge Drive that meets their rules and regulations. But that will all be done, assuming the preliminary plat gets approved. Then we'll go into the design phase, which would last several months. And all of these issues with sewer capacity and water capacity and stormwater runoff, all these issues will work through crunching all the numbers. We'll submit them to the city. The city will pass it on to their third-party review engineer. They'll issue review comments. We'll address any concerns that they have, and ultimately issue a set of construction plans that are approved by the city and the Ozark Special Road District. Then at that point, they would be able to build those improvements along with the public improvements before any homes were constructed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think I have any other questions for you, but Cameron, I do have a question. First of all, I love having all these engineers here. That's great. I love it. But I think you had mentioned if they do get this approved, that's with the infrastructure plans. That's more the detailed process of the nitty gritty.
Yeah, so assuming the preliminary plat is approved, then they would proceed on with developing their final construction drawings and submit those to city staff to follow up with our engineer and DNR in specific cases to further evaluate those specific designs. And that's where Mr. Hodges clarified that, yeah, they would really get into the refinement of detail and exactly what improvements would be required. Right now, the preliminary plat is kind of a conceptual plan because they haven't really got into the construction drawings. And at the same time, they'd go into the full design of the roads, the streets, curb and gutter. And with that, a lot of times becomes a storm system as well.
Gotcha. Cameron, could you elaborate a little bit more? The difference between Ozark Special Road District versus an Ozark maintained road? What's the difference, or is there a difference?
Well, we both, between the city of Ozark roads and the Ozark Special Roads, they do have a different set of standards as far as the type of roads and the construction type. We try to collaborate as much as we can to be on the same design specs. But yes, anything that is owned by Ozark Special, they own and maintain those. And if it's a city street, we own and maintain. So in this case, 10th Street is a city street owned and maintained, and then Greenbridge is an owned and maintained street by Ozark Special Road District. So they have jurisdiction over that road, as Mr. Miller had stated on behalf of OSRD, and then we have jurisdiction over 10th Street.
Why is there a difference there? Or who's kind of head of?
Walmart versus Lowe's. I mean, it's kind of two different owners, two different ownerships that have their own regulations. So that's why. In the city of Ozark, we have City of Ozark streets, we have MoDOT, we have OSRD, we have the Selmore Road District and the County Road District. So there's 5 road districts within the city of Ozark. So yeah, it just happens to be a different district, just like an Ozark school is a different entity than the city of Ozark. The fire district's a different entity than the city of Ozark, so.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Next, you can go again if you need to.
Yeah, I just had a question for the developer. What is the minimum viable amount of lots to make this development happen? Because obviously there's a number, like if things have to go, as far as budgeting wise, where are you at?
Hard to answer.
Sure.
When I look at a development like this, it's sort of like making a soup. There's a lot of ingredients. Everything costs a little bit. I still don't know what stormwater is going to cost, and as Eric indicated, and there's been a lot of good questions about it. That some of these retention basins are going to be very expensive.
Right.
So trying to value engineer those to make sure they perform, but also are cost effective. I mean, we originally wanted to be at 93, which is why the traffic study was placed at 93. We couldn't reasonably do that and manage the stormwater, which is why we got to 93, because on the northwest corner, there were 5 more lots there. And we needed that for stormwater retention. And just while I'm on that point, I do want to make sure, and Eric sort of brushed over it, but we're responsible for every drop of stormwater on this property and where it leaves, how it leaves, the flow that it leaves. And, I do want to make sure people understand that, I said to somebody the other day, if I put a basketball court, right on that center road, and it was a, 20 foot by 20 foot paved basketball court, I couldn't do it without retention, the way the ordinance is currently written. So there's a tremendous amount of effort and work that goes into making sure that, I believe the requirement that we're held to is that we cannot increase flow at any single point leaving the site. So there's a lot to that. So that took us down from 93 to 88. Honestly, I think we're probably really at 2 less than that. The corner lots, 80, I think it's 89 or 88 and 87 are not really probably viable. We've discussed, and they're going to be on the plat this way if it's approved. We've discussed making those like a tot lot or a green space lot, just because they're not really desirable. But to answer your question, the reality is I don't know. When we get past the point where we've got construction documents and we know how much things are likely going to be cost us to build the horizontal development, then we've got to figure out what our options are on the vertical to make sure that we actually can make this work. So we won't really spend any money until we're sure what ingredients we have, how much they cost, and what we want to do on the backside. I mean, the goal here is to do, these are specifically larger lots on corner lots and in some areas specifically larger to be able to provide larger green lots, larger open space. We want to do side load garages on these houses. We want to do a 2-story with an optional basement on some of them. So the idea is to try and do, you know, as much as we can here, but the truth of the matter is when you're in my position today, I don't know.
Right.
You know, more is always better, but there's a balance between more and what's right for the homes and what gets us a good product and gets the neighborhood a good feel. So that's where you've got on that eastern side and that southern side where you've got the big triangle square lots. It just feels like they should be a little bit further apart there.
Right.
So anything less than, you know, right about where we're at is a complete redesign.
Right. Okay. That was.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Not yet. Not my turn. What if I don't have a question? Well, as stated before, I'm gonna ask you, because I want to make sure everyone gets a chance, okay? Trevor, anything? Nothing. Lacey? Lee? You got your chance. Alexi? Nothing? The only clarification I'd like to have, and it's already been said, but I want it clear. There's been multiple engineers, there's been multiple people reviewing this information from the city to 2 different road districts to Public Works. It has been exhausting, but the most important thing is that we do the right thing, that we hold true to what is right. Can you explain a little bit, Cameron, about the process? Again, I know this is redundant. If this passes, then what specific steps happen? I know it goes to the board for their review and processing, but we mentioned being able to actually lay out specifics if it's passed, get down to the actual cost of doing the work and how big the retentions and the roads. And can you give us kind of a timeline more specific than what you gave on how it all works?
Yeah, so following this meeting tonight, if this passes or any application, it goes on to the Board of Aldermen for first reading and second reading. Two public meetings. One is a public hearing, the other one is closed to the public, but it is a public meeting. So they would make the final determination at their second meeting. If the board approves an application, then the next step for a development such as this, the applicant, their engineers would start final designing the infrastructure such as the roads, utilities, and stormwater. Once those are completed, they'd make application to city staff for public improvement plans. That would be submitted to city staff and as well as Ozark Special Road District and their engineer in this case, in this application. Generally, when there's an application that ties in some form to another road district, then we bring them in, such as Ozark Special or MoDOT. Some cases we have to bring MoDOT in for review as well. So they'd submit those public improvement plans for review. I mentioned that the 30 days, sometimes it could take longer. It really is dependent on once they get the final design submitted, staff reviews that, get comments back to them, them addressing comments, depending that back and forth to address comments or finalization. Staff follows the guidelines and the documents and the enforcement books that are put in place, adopted by the board for stormwater criteria, the traffic impact studies criteria, water and sewer plans, and so forth. So they submit those plans for review, and once those would be approved, then that developer is released to proceed with construction of the infrastructure. No homes would be built. All of the infrastructure, in this case, they're looking at one phase, so it would be the entire subdivision. That would be constructed. All the roads would be constructed, all the utilities would be constructed, minus communication utilities. A lot of times they won't come in until after later. But generally the electric, water and sewer will be put in along with stormwater. Once that's all complete, everything is seeded and strawed, stabilized so that the land disturbance permit can be released. They would provide a maintenance bond as well that's good for a year for any issues that could occur with the infrastructure that's in place. The city would then, following the improvements being in place and approved, then they can make application for final plat. Like I said, generally that construction process, we see it taking at least a year to get through in a subdivision like this. Could be quicker, could be longer, depending on the material supply and then the speed of the construction company. Once the final plat application is made, if it conforms to the preliminary plat approved, that, like I said, is by ordinance and administrative approval. Staff reviews that application, make sure it does conform. Generally, there are some finalization of the drawings, whether it's notes or confirming anything that needs in place, refinement of square footage and lots that might got tweaked because of a stormwater basin. Then make that applications. Once staff has been satisfied with our comments, then we'd reach out to the mayor, you, Mr. Chairman, and then the city administrator to sign off on that final plat. Once that final plat has signed off, then they can take that to the recorder's office and get recorded. Once it's recorded and it's legally platted as individual lots, then they can start pulling building permits for homes. So from that point, the applicant could be building those homes. They could sell the lots to other home builders, however they see fit. So that kind of is that process. Given at this point, they've got several months invested. So from their initial start to ready to build a home is probably like a 2-year time frame. So anyway, that's kind of the outline of the full process.
Thank you for that. One more time. You go right in.
So didn't know if there's anybody here that can elaborate more on the traffic study. I think it was the first gentleman that brought up the issue that it was done on August 10th, whenever school is not in session. Is there I went through as much as I could of the traffic study. It's pretty elaborate and involved. But that is a pretty significant concern from the public. Is there anything that I had missed that kind of elaborates more on that kind of traffic during school time?
Yeah, I'll definitely ask we got a room full of engineers to come up and address that, but I will say they did follow the requirements that we had in place along with the Ozark Special Road District. But again, you got the applicant's engineer, you got Public Works and our city engineer, along with the Special Road District's engineer to confirm any of those. But I mean, I don't recall that ever being a concern based on the timing of that.
And then there was also mention with the flooding that happens along that creek. Is that part of the traffic study in any way? If that's a frequent occurrence of an obstruction to those highways and that outlet?
If there's a flooding today that's derived from the road existing, then that's probably something that the road district would look into. But the stormwater report actually addressed any future flooding for this development. As they noted, is they can't release any more that releases today. So if there's a flooding situation today, it'll be there unless there's some changes made. But with this development, it wouldn't increase that flooding concern.
Thank you.
Go.
I have 2 more, sorry. Cameron, I know one of the things that was been addressed was ice on the roads and going back to road jurisdiction. Is that what's the main obstacle as far as obviously towns of our size would have a difficult time getting everywhere in a timely manner, but is it a budget issue? We don't have the budget. Is it just a weather issue? Some years are worse than others as far as the ice concerns for these different roads and getting them salted or cleared. Is it an issue that the different districts are looking at?
I'll ask the Public Works Director to address that because they handle in the city, the snow and ice.
Okay.
So, due to our topography, we're kind of unique for a city our size. Most cities, you'll see that they will not, go out and treat and push snow. Because if we're blessed with this hilly terrain, we do get to go out there and treat and push snow. Again, you've got multiple jurisdictions here. We can't keep up with a jurisdiction like MoDOT. They've got far better equipment, more resources, all those things. But funny enough, just at our last non-legislative meeting, we passed a policy to kind of so that we know internally when we're supposed to go out there. ICE, we try to get out there right away. And I know these people, I have been up and down that road. We try to get to it quickly. Sometimes, depending on how cold it is, our treatment won't even work. So we'll spread gravel down their road, just trying to give them something to get traction. But overall, I will say this for Ozark Special Roads as well. I think they do a very proactive job of treating our roads. Could we do better if we had more resources? Absolutely. But it is very expensive, and it's something that we do start with, as Cameron mentioned, emergency routes. And we try to make sure that we can get in and out of all the ambulance barns, fire stations, all of those things. And then we start working to the residential neighborhoods.
Thanks. I just wanted to have, some information considering that was a concern. And then my last question is for the developer. Are you at the stage, have you done any core drilling samples to see if there's any possibility of rock issues when it comes to land development?
None at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Generally, for me, when we do this, that's not a concern.
Sure.
When you're going to move, that much dirt around, it's just. not a
Gotcha.
concern.
I know there have been at least two other developments I know of in the area that have had to majorly change plans because of hitting rock. And that area being so close to that riverbed geologically, it was just a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One more round.
Okay.
You're welcome to. At this point, if we've exhausted questions and comments, we'd be looking for a motion to move forward.
I'll make a motion to approve the application for preliminary plat 23-0003 based on staff recommendations.
Second.
You have a second? Megan, would you roll call, please?
Chad Zickapoose.
Aye.
Steve Renfro. Aye. Jeff Garrison.
Aye.
Alexi Pavlov.
Aye.
Stacy Colbert. Trevor Brandt. Aye. Glenn Oakes.
Aye.
Adam Brown.
Aye.
Tyler Goldberg.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're moving forward to our next letter B, which is a zoning amendment. 23-0014. Property owner JLK, I guess that's +3 LLC. Property location is lot 6 of Collins Point. Existing zoning is R3, medium density multifamily district. Requested zoning is C2, general commercial district. You might want to give them a minute.
We ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, the application is to rezone approximately 1.73 acres from R3 medium density residential to C2 general commercial district. The property is currently vacant at this time. There are no overlay districts that affect this property. The property can be serviced by water and sewer. If public mains are needed and to be extended, that would be the responsibility of the developer. The surrounding zoning is C2 general commercial to the north, R4 high density residential to the east, and A1 agriculture district to the south and west. The comprehensive plan does recommend the future land use as residential multifamily based on the existing zoning. The requested zoning of C2 General Commercial District would be an appropriate zoning request as it would be in continuation of the current zoning from the north as part of the Collins Point subdivision and would also be in keeping with the surrounding zoning districts. Based on staff report and findings, staff does recommend approval of the zoning request.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a representative or someone of this property? And would you like to speak to it, sir?
John Torgerson, 130 Sherwood Forest Lane in Ridgedale. Thanks for hearing this tonight. Hopefully this is a little bit less complicated. We've been talking about this rezoning for several years, and we just think it makes more sense. It's a small acreage parcel. We've got some sinkholes to deal with. The densities are about the same when we look at traffic and those kind of things. But as far as a development, it really works better for a small commercial development. So talking with city staff and looking at what is there in Collins Point and extending that. We know there's some conversations of a future road that kind of goes through lot 6 and lot 7, if you're familiar with that, which is basically right on top of the sinkhole. There's some easements in place on that final plat right now. So breaking those into 2 pieces and having that C2 extend from the north just seems to make better sense. So that's the request tonight.
Thank you, sir. If we have any questions, we might call you back. Okay, I'll open this up to the public for comments. Who would like to be first? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Philip Sylvie. My address is 203 Rolling Meadows Drive, Ozark. I'm also a member of the board of the church, the Ozark Assembly of God Church, which is just to the west of the lot that is being zoned. Our concern is if you can go further north to lot 2, right on South Street, that's where Rosie Joe's, in addition to other businesses, are there. When you look at the back of that property, those buildings are basically 1 sidewalk's width or just a little more from the edge of our property to the back of those buildings. The employees, because of the lack of parking, they have to park on the church's parking lot. In addition, at least once, I can't tell you how many other times, I've seen a semi backed into our parking lot unloading material for Rosie Joe's. Now, our parking lot is basically made for cars. It wasn't ever intended for semis. What we wish to see happen is if this is zoned commercial, we'd like to see at least the back part of the property adjoining the church's property with enough space between the building that employees are allowed to be able to park behind it, behind their building, rather than building the building right up on the parking lot or the church property. I'm sorry, a little nervous here. Also, we have a daycare, licensed daycare at the church. We really are concerned, very concerned about the safety of our children. And we want to make sure that there's nothing going in there that could be detrimental to our children. That's about it, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? See much movement, so I'll go ahead and close the public portion and open it up to the commission for questions and comments. Yes, sir.
A couple questions maybe for Cameron. I think is the buffer yard behind that? Am I right on that, or is that?
So between the commercial zoning and the agriculture zoning, buffer yard is required. Now there is a stipulation in the buffer yard requirement that allows for some waiver of that if it's a vacant lot that's used for agriculture. But that location he's referred to, I don't know if it's just developed prior to the code or what, but yeah, in this application case, I think you pointed to it, I think it's 25 feet in width. So from 25 feet in width, it does require some plantings and a fence that buffer yard along the various property lines. That would be a setback for a building in a park. Generally, a parking lot can go 5 feet or 10 feet to a property line, and a building is 20, 25 feet. But in this case, because the buffer yard is that large, building or parking lot cannot be within 25 feet of that property.
And then one other question. So maybe for you, sir, does the church own that land all the way that stretches down there, down south, including that part that's earmarked to agriculture right now? Yeah,
Yes, please.
The church owns basically 10 acres, and if you look at the
That whole
ground
big piece,
area,
okay.
we own all the way back to almost to the subdivision.
Okay.
on
And then
the
just
south
one
side.
point of clarification that I think you brought up, sir. So I know when we brought in the marijuana things and some of that stuff, since there's a daycare that's run out of there, that still's under the same pieces that there can't be liquor sales and different things within that piece, or did that change?
Well, no, I mean, it's allowed in C1.
Okay.
The thing is the way it's measured, liquor versus or marijuana, it's
Yeah.
100 feet from entrance to entrance.
Okay.
So yeah, it still would be a requirement or a concern there depending on setback.
Okay, and I know the school's kind of on the front there on that other side south. Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Just a question, not that you may know. I'm just curious, do you know what your plans may be for that section of property at this point? Or is it kind of, don't really know yet?
We have a couple of potential buyers for that. As many of you know, I own a design service here in town, and so we would be involved in that development. We're not builders. We're working with them, but we've got some potential. Both of them are very, I would say, smaller projects. It's only an acre, 0.7, and the sinkholes take up some room. So I mean, the buildability in there isn't like what there's a Joe's or something in there, but we would have to study it. But I do have some potential that would fall in that C2.
All I needed, thank you. I've already closed the public portion, sir, I'm sorry. Anyone else? I've got Headley. Oh, sorry,
Just
go ahead.
quick, I know the surrounding land use, the church, and then the vacant agriculture next to it. I know those aren't highlighted, but is that still city?
They are highlighted. It's just our agriculture is a brown tone.
Okay, yeah, that's why I couldn't tell, so I was just, making sure.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Do my job. Chad? Go ahead. I knew you had something.
Well, I don't know if it has any bearing of anything, but I do have a couple questions for the gentleman from the church. If you could come up. I'm just curious, I assume that the commercial development has permission to park in your parking lot?
Yes, we've given the employees permission to park there just because they have no place else to park to facilitate parking for their customers. So yes, we've allowed them to park in our parking lot.
Okay. And have you considered to build a fence on the property line to keep the?
Have we or have they?
You, the church?
No, we have not.
I was just curious. Okay, thank you. The only other comment I'll make is I think it makes sense to extend the commercial, another lot to the south. It's limited, like was already said, with the sinkholes. I think it still does allow a buffer area between the commercial and the residential. You have a couple sinkholes south of this lot. You have what looks like some flood zone area. So I think that will remain a buffer area to the neighborhood. So, I think it seems reasonable. Anyway, that's my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Trevor? Any questions or comments I gotta ask? Lacy? Pete? I know you're good. When? Nothing. Alexi? Hadley again? No, you're good? Looking for a motion?
I make a motion to approve zoning amendment 23-0014 per staff recommendation.
You get that, Megan? Roll call when you get a chance.
Alexi Powell,
Aye.
Tyler Goldberg,
Aye.
Pete Renfro. Adam Brown,
Aye.
Lacy Colbert, Jeff Garrison,
Aye.
Trevor Branch,
Aye.
Chad Dickinson,
Aye.
Jim Oaks.
Aye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I didn't cover it up. We're not done yet.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate you coming in. Thank you. Open floor for discussion. Move it to commission comments first. Do anyone have any comments? Hadley, go.
I'll say two quick things. If any of the commission's interested in school districts doing a long range planning things. So we've met already one time, but I definitely encourage you guys to kind of come and just kind of hear that as well. As I said, they kind of went over some other subdivisions, things like that coming in, but I mean, I just would love to have some other commissioners on there as well. And then just kudos to the city, like the lights downtown here look amazing. I thought the Christmas parade was great. I mean, and then just kind of our Christmas drive through there as well. I know we're doing a walkthrough, so if you have not did that last year, it's a lot of fun. That's all I got.
I have a question for that. Do you know when the next long range?
I can let you know, give me a second. I'll let you know.
Look it up while we go.
Emails.
Yeah, there you go. Alexi, you good? When?
Cameron, if the next phase, whenever the first amendment goes to the Board of Aldermen, they make any changes, does it come back to us, or does it go to like their second reading? Or how's that work?
It really depends on it. It would be at the probably the discretion of either the applicant requesting it to go back or if the board sees a reason to send it back. I think you're referring to the first application, they made changes. But trying to not get specific on it, but any application to go to the board, if they have seen in the past significant changes, I have seen requests to go back to P and Z. I don't know that I anticipate any specific changes, but there is a possibility. I've seen that 2 or 3 times.
And there is a public portion with the first reading.
So the board is the official public hearing by statute, and yes, it is a public hearing, the exact same thing we heard possibly tonight. And then the second, we just close the public unless the board asks specific people to come in.
I have one thing.
Go.
I'd just like to confirm that we are not meeting on Christmas Day, even though it's the 4th Monday.
We're gonna cover that.
Okay, I just,
Give us a minute. We're about there.
I figured, but I figured I was gonna check.
You're good.
It might be a quick meeting.
Pete, what you got? Waiting to hear from the meeting. Well, that, okay. Lacy. Trevor. Chad. You're good? We all need to be glad Pete is upright and walking. Thank you. Amen, brother. Glad you're back. Do you have it? Or are you gonna meet me?
Thanks for keeping such good order. I thought you did a nice job with all the people things. I thought Jeff, you guys deal on that.
Good job.
I believe, the next long range plan is December 12th, 6:30.
West Elementary.
December 12th.
12th at 6:30 at West Elementary. Dinner's provided and then they have childcare. And then January 16th, 6:30 at the middle school. So what it showed last time is that really from last year, we'll end up being like 3 kids. And I think it's just kind of people slow down moving here, but with the subdivision moving south, like I think we'll see it pick back up again soon.
You know what time those meetings start?
6:38.
And they are discussing that, I read about the
Yeah.
analysis or whatever.
Oh, yeah, and that's why he just brought that up and like I want to.
Right, I read that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone's good. I'm opening it up to administrative comments. Mr. Smith.
In your packet, you guys have a proposed calendar for next year. It is still a draft. We will probably bring it back in December meeting.
Very back page, Dylan.
I don't know if we get official action, but it is outlined in our meetings. So you have that in front of you. We have a few offsets for holidays. So that's there. And then also with that calendar, it also outlines the application timeframes, publications and things like that. The next item, is the December meeting. Originally, it was scheduled for the 27th of December, which was a Wednesday. Generally, if a holiday falls on a Monday, they go to Tuesday. When the city first drafted the calendar in the beginning of the year, the city was going to be closed Monday and Tuesday. That's why it was on a Wednesday. Well, due to some recent legislative changes, now the city has to accept applicants for voting or running for election for the 26th of December. So because of that, City Hall has to be open the 26th. So the city has revised their calendar to be closed on Friday and Monday around the Christmas holiday. So with that, we are proposing to move our 27th meeting up from a Wednesday to the 26th of a Tuesday. That right now, our anticipation is it'll be on the Tuesday night, which is typical for a Monday holiday. But since we had already published it for the 27th, we haven't addressed any concerns with moving it. We can leave it on the 27th, but I think the desire of staff in the city is to move it to the 26th, which would be a Tuesday.
Anyone have any comments or know you're gonna be gone?
I will be at a hockey game on the 27th, so I appreciate it. My daughter's birthday's on the 27th, so the 26th.
I will just need to call in then, because we'll be trying on the 6th.
We can look at sending a Zoom link.
Yeah.
Either call or video. Well, you use the number on the Zoom, so yeah, just don't turn video. You can use the call number, but it'll be the link.
Okay, so I guess everyone's good with 26 right now then. Let's go ahead and put it on there. I'd rather go to church on 27. If we have it, we may not even have it. I don't know. Megan, do you have anything you would like to add?
We are working on our corridor plan, and there is a survey open until the last few days. I'll try to put out a link tomorrow, so that if anybody hasn't taken it yet, but it's for the 3 corridors for South Street, South 3rd Street and Highway, and see what the future land uses will be on those corridors.
Yep.
So it's pretty quick survey.
I would highly recommend we all try to take that.
Yeah, it'd be appreciated.
Because this is really, really important to our city.
Do we know what the like how many responses we've got so far?
We've got a good response. I think it's last week it was like less than 500.
Yeah. Still hovering in that mid 400 region. It's on Facebook.
Yeah, Jennifer has a good job from that.
It has been a really good turnout. Right now, though, the meeting that's coming up, we'll have 2 stakeholder technical committee meetings, and you guys are all welcome to come. It's on December 11th and 12th. It's not all day. We can get you the exact schedule. That's kind of the public portion. So they'll ask for comments. Right now, we're planning to be at the church next LC is it First Baptist will be there for that. And again, it's not all day. We get some comments. Everyone will disperse. The consultant will gather data, produce some information, and we'll get back together. I believe on the second day, it's only like 4:30 to 6.
Yeah, like after.
So that the long range planning will be leading. Staff, we'll send you out some information about that, but we'd be glad to have you there if you guys are able to attend. We're a little concerned we won't get a big turnout. We're hoping for about 80-ish people, just from that.
All right, well, I do appreciate everyone here and your diligence in attending and your concern and diligence in participating in our community.
For free.
For free. You were a boy. Have you not got your check yet? And I don't know. You lived here your whole life? Yeah. Has anyone else lived here their whole life?
Not in the city, but local.
Locally, you count. We'll count that. I've never not had an address in Ozark, Missouri, ever. And it's important to me, and I can tell it's important to you guys what happened, so I appreciate it all, every bit of it. All I lack is a motion to, oh, we're too late for the news, okay.
I'll second.
And they all said.